Hey everybody, welcome back to Bookish Daddy. Thank you all for joining me. Today I am going to do my top 10 books of all time. So I have seen a lot of the booktubers I follow and the big booktubers posting this video. I thought it would be not only fun, but a good idea to see in 6 months to a year from now how much my top 10 changed. Because I'll be honest, the last 3 to 5 months, my top 10 books of all time have changed pretty drastically. There have only been a very few, one or two, that have maintained top 10 for a long time. So, yeah, let's get into it. The first book I'm going to go over is probably one of my favorite books ever. I've gone over it before. It's what got me back into reading when I was like 18, and it is Homeland, The Legend of Dritz by R.A. Salvatore. This is the first book in the series, the Legends of Dritz series. This is it again. And as you can tell, it's been beat up. It's been read probably 10, 15 times. This is my favorite because it is the first in the series. I'm going to do a honorable mention, a shout out to my favorite book in the series that isn't the first one, and it is Gauntlegrim. Uh, it is a phenomenal book. But for those of you who have not read this, this is a Dungeons and Dragons book. Uh, it is about a drow which is a dark elf, and where he is raised, it is very demonic, and basically their whole society is based off of lies and deception and fighting and being raised to kill everyone. And then Dritz is born, and he's got purple eyes, so he looks a little different than all the others. He acts a little different. He actually has a conscience, and uh, the first few times he tries to be nice, it's kind of beaten out of him, or so they think. So a lot of this is his inner dialogue of knowing what's wrong and how to survive in a society that thrives off of evil when he has a good heart. It is such a good book. I love this book so much. It means a lot to me. Like I said, the spine's all beat to crap. I've had this book most of my life. So that's why I wanted to mention it first. The entire series I've read. I'll warn you, towards the end of the series, there's like 32 books in the series. It really does start to fall off, but the first, say, 12 to 15 are phenomenal books. So the first book on my top 10 list is, again, it'll be Homeland by R.A. Salvatore. It is a fantasy book, and it is just one of the best books I have ever read. The next book I'm going to go over is the only book that I don't own a physical copy of anymore, and it is A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. It was written in 1912, and it is way beyond its time. When you read it, you will be just blown away with his world building and the way that he almost can see the future. Some of the stuff is very outlandish, but just the fact that he's able to write some of these concepts into being in this world, it is so good. So it follows the main protagonist is it takes place in the old west. He's a cowboy. He's the fastest gun. He's the strongest when it comes to brawling. He's a fighter by heart. And kind of the saying where they're at is Mars is where all warriors go to die. It's kind of like their Valhalla. It's where all the Westerners go. It's where it's an endless battles. And one night he's in the desert staring at Mars, and something happens, and he gets sucked into Mars. Um, and there are these big green aliens and all these crazy creatures, and he's fighting gravity and all these different things, and you're introduced to just some phenomenal world building. It is kind of a romance because it is the Princess of Mars. It's what the whole books are about, is this princess that it just instantly takes his heart away, and it's him following her around and misunderstanding situations because he doesn't really know the social etiquette on Mars. It is such a fun read. It's very good. The physical books and the audiobooks are both, they're so good. I'm telling you, if you want a good sci-fi fantasy with a little bit of romance, it's one of my favorites of all time. So that's the second book out of my top 10. The third book, it's so hard to talk about. I've brought this one up a lot, but it is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And it is the first book in the King Killer Chronicles. I think that's what they're called, King Killer. This book is so freaking good, and it's so frustrating that he won't finish the series or hasn't finished it in so long, because this is a very good book. I've never really gone into what it's about, so for those of you who haven't read it, it is about a bard named Quoth, and it is a fantasy book. I'd say high fantasy or epic fantasy. The world building in it is phenomenal. It is very cool to see a main character where it's not just like a warrior. It's like a bard who has all his stats in charisma. He's super charismatic. He grew up in a traveling troupe, like a circus troupe. So he's very good with people and talking and acting, and he plays the lute, and he's very good at it. But then he stumbles upon a wizard, or it's kind of this world's version of magic, and this wizard realizes how quick he is being a little boy and how smart he is, and starts teaching him like the basis of magic, uh, and is trying to get him into a university. He learns the sword, so which most bards in D&D are very good with the sword. So in this book, there are some evil characters, the bad guys, the villains. They have not been around for so long that they've become songs. But where these songs are being played in certain areas, people are like just dying. And it's his journey through this realm of dark creatures and these dark villains that are just terrorizing and killing everybody, and kind of their old history of the gods and what's going on. And it is phenomenally written. It had to make my top 10. I debated taking it out because of all the animosity towards the third book not being written, but I can't help it. I loved this book so much. So if you don't mind being a part of an eternal cliffhanger, I highly recommend reading The Name of the Wind, because it is worth it. I've read this 3 times and I love it. It's such a good book. All right, the fourth book in my list is Path of Destruction, which is the first book in the Darth Bane trilogy. So it's a sci-fi. As you've all seen, that's what my entire arm sleeve is of. It had to make my top 10. So Darth Bane is a Sith Lord. He is the one who created the Rule of Two. So if you're familiar with the new movies, how there's always, just a Dark Lord and their Padawan or their follower, apprentice, such as Vader and Sidious, and so on and so forth. There's all two. That's all because of Bane. So in his timeline, the Old Republic, there are legions of Sith, and he basically single-handedly kills off all of them except for who he deems necessary to be his apprentice, or who he deems worthy. And he is just the biggest badass in sci-fi or the Star Wars universe, in my opinion. I love his story. His apprentice, Darth Zana, is one of my favorites as well. She is an animal. She's more of a, instead of lightsaber user, she's more of a witchcraft or uh, demons, like opening other realms. She starts studying relics and ancient stuff. Phenomenal book. If you're not into Star Wars, it's still worth listening to as well. The audiobooks are phenomenally done. All 3 of them have all the sound effects. It feels like you're there. They're intense and so fun to listen to, and the book is amazing to read. The 5th book I have also talked about before, and it is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This, I laughed last time because it says on it that it is Willy Wonka meets the Matrix. I'll hold it up for y'all to see. That is a very good description of this. So I'll go over it again, even though I have before. Basically, there is a billionaire who creates this place called the Oasis. It is a virtual reality uh, game that becomes way more than a game. It's almost this world's entire culture. Uh, the world has kind of fallen into a dark place. There's lots of poor people, and the way he built the Oasis, it is free for everyone. There's even like college universities in it. There's all this cool stuff, and he wanted it to kind of reflect his favorite things in life. He grew up in the 80s, so it's a lot of 80s bands, diners, video games, board games, D&D, all crammed into this one world. And on his deathbed, he announces that there's an Easter egg in the world, and whoever finds it gets his wealth. It is fun. It is so well written. The world building in it is very well done. There are no like, oh, I wonder what this would be like, or I wish he would have gone more in detail on this. No, he really breaks down every element of this world and what would happen. And he even goes into like how corrupt governments would react to billions of dollars being on the line, and tries to place firewalls and stuff to help protect the game. It is such a good read. And if you were into like video games, Dungeons and Dragons, uh, VR sets, anything like that, board games, or 80s music and lifestyle, you will love this book. It is such a fun read. All right. The next book is a very recent book that made the top 10. It pushed out some of my other books, and it is King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. Uh, it is a horror romance or dark fantasy, I think is how it's described. Dark fantasy. Um, this book actually pushed out a Court of Silver Flames for me. Um, the smut in this is better. The story is better. The battle scenes are better. It beat it in every category for me, which is saying a lot. I had 5-starred A Court of Silver Flames, and after reading this, I actually knocked it down to 4 stars and gave this 5 stars because I saw what potential the other book had that I didn't even think could be done. So this is about a vampire lord and a basically a woman whose kingdom is failing, and this vampire lord has taken over the world. And so her dad, who is king of of the kingdom, one of the last kingdom standing, gives his daughter to this vampire lord to keep his kingdom intact and from being taken. And as she goes to this new world, she starts to discover new things that she didn't know, and things she thought that she knew are different. If I said that right. the It is very spicy, so I warn you, if you don't like spice, it is very smutty. If you don't like gore, it is very gory. So it is a classic um, vampire book. I would say it is kind of like Twilight, but take A Quarter Silver Flames, and so take Twilight and make it way more violent and smutty. it's it's very. I loved it. I thought it was a super phenomenal read. As you can tell, it's in my top 10. I cannot praise this book enough because I never thought my top 10 would change so drastically. But as soon as I finished this, I was like, oh wow, this kind of changes my perspective on books. Yeah, so if you're wanting to read a good vampire book and you don't mind a lot of gore or very detailed sex scenes, uh, this is a very fun read. It's a very good book. The next book I have also talked about, and it is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Man, this is such a cozy read. It's super fun. It was one of my first major romance novels that I've read, and I loved it so much. So as you can tell by all the beakers and the lab coats, it is a science romance, or my wife makes fun of me. I said a beaker romance or whatever it is. Uh, it is also academia, I guess I would say, because it takes place in a college university. Um, and it is Grumpy Sunshine. So this is such a fun read. It's super cute. Um, this one I don't want to give too many spoilers, but uh, basically, as you can tell, kind of by his look, he looks a little bit like Kylo Ren. The author of this book, I think, was obsessed with Kylo Ren in the Star Wars and kind of built his character around him. Um, it is such a fun read. If you were looking for a good romance, uh, I highly recommend this one. I 5-starred it and it made my top 10 list. I think it may be the only pure romance on the entire list. And it kind of set the standard for romance books for me. So when I read a romance book, this is what I'm comparing it to. And I loved it so much. Yeah, that's so aside from just being like grumpy sunshine, it's fake dating as well, which is my favorite romance trope now because of this book. And if you're into the fake dating, grumpy sunshine, or university, like college type romances, I highly recommend this book. And Allie Hazelwood did an amazing job with the writing in this. It's a little bit spicy, not nearly as spicy as the Battle and Blood book I was just talking about. This is just more romance. There's a little bit of spice, nothing crazy. The next book, the 8th book in my top 10, is my favorite book in the Throne of Glass series, Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. So this one is my favorite because it goes over my favorite characters in the series more in depth. It's a lot of Dorian, a lot of Manon, a lot of Aelin and Rowan together, and even Rolf comes back into the picture. This entire series was so good. I loved it so much. But if I had to pick a book to go into my top 10 from the series, this is which book it would be. So if you're reading Throne and Glass, let me know what you thought of this book. Or if you haven't gotten to it yet, just know that there are some awesome scenes coming up in your near future. The next book, the 9th book, is my favorite Brandon Sanderson book, The Hero of Ages, which is the 3rd book in the Mistborn trilogy. Uh, Again, the ending to this is so well written and awesome that I went back and reread the first 2 books as soon as I finished this. I was just like, so much started to make sense and click. I can't get into this, especially my wife is in the middle of reading the second one, so I can't give many spoilers. The Mistborn world is high fantasy or epic fantasy. There's no smut or anything like that. It's not super gory. It's just very well written fantasy. It is a world where, boy, it'll go very in depth, but to keep it light, it is a world where metals are used in the magic system. So different metals have different powers. Different people are born able to use one or another, unless you are a Mistborn who can use all the metals and all the powers. And it follows a young girl named Vin, who had a rough upbringing and becomes a huge badass. So this is the final book in the trilogy, and it is just, it wraps up so nicely. And this is my favorite trilogy of all time. So it had to be in here. And if I had to pick one of the 10 books, this would be my favorite book of all time. It is so good. I've read it 3 times, I think, and every time it just amazes me how well written these books are. The 10th book is another Brandon Sanderson book. Surprise, surprise. It is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, and it is such a good book. So this is a cozy fantasy. If you're ever wanting a whimsical, cozy book to read, I always recommend this. I've recommended it to so many people just because it really has my heart. It is a light romance, more whimsical fantasy than romance, but it does have sprinkled in there. Um, it is just such an interesting world and a cute world that he built. Um, it, I don't even know where to begin. So she is chasing a man that she loves across the world, or this dangerous world, and discovering more about herself every day that she is looking for him. And it is so cute. It is such a fun read, easy read. You could knock it out fairly quickly, and honestly, it's a rereadable book. It is one of the top 10 that, if I'm having a down day or want to be happy or just have a cozy in between read, this is one that I highly recommend picking up because it is just so fun. It's just a fun read, and I highly enjoyed it. Uh, that is my top 10 favorite books of all time. Very wide variety, and I'm very curious to see how much it changes because just in the last year, I have probably read 6 of those top 10, maybe 5. Um, the only ones that have like stayed very consistently in my top 10 would be A Princess of Mars, Dritz, Mistborn, and Ready Player One. All the rest are fairly new reads. Um, so I'm very curious now that I'm getting into romance. I'm about to start getting into some academia books. I'm just very curious over the next 6 months to a year to see how vastly different my top 10 is, because it has changed a lot. Before I end the video, I do have something else. So I finally got a Fairy Loot subscription to the YA Club. If you don't want to see May's Fairy Loot book, you can go ahead and turn off the video. But for those of you that are curious, I got it in the mail and wanted to show off kind of all the stuff that came in my little box. The book is The Temptation of Magic, if you can see that. And it is by Megan Scott. And it has beautiful sprayed edges. And the artwork in it is super cool. It is just a beautiful looking book. It is a dark academia book as well, it looks like. And it says, as an Imperial, Nicole has the ability to kill any deadly supernatural. But if her power ever awakened, the Wake, which is an organization that governs supernaturals, would force her to be their loyal huntress or kill her like they did her mother. I could keep reading, but it's a long paragraph. I'm excited about this book. I think it's going to be my next read after Empire of the Vampire. They also sent me a little fake book that opens up and holds stuff. A pillowcase from Atlas 6 that I have not read yet, but I added to my TBR now that I have a pillowcase for it. Some Study in Drowning pens, which I haven't read either. Another one on my TBR. And a glasses case, which my wife will use because I don't wear glasses. That is it for the video. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed hearing my top 10. And if you haven't read any, I hope that you'll go read them. Thank you all so much. I hope that you're enjoying my content. And if you are, make sure you subscribe. It really helps me, and I enjoy getting to know you all. Make sure you comment, you like, you share my videos. It means the world to me. It does. You guys are the best. I love how interactive you've been. The last fantasy poll I did, you all chose epic fantasy. It blew the others out of the water, which I'm upset. I actually double voted for cozy fantasies because those are my favorite. But epic won. I think we got like 120 people voted, so that's awesome. Continue to be interactive. I love it. I love talking to y'all and getting to know what you enjoy, what books you like to read, adding my TBR, making my bookshelf longer. And I hope you all have a great week. You had a safe weekend, and I'll see you next week.